So today I have with me Jeaneen Tang, and I would like to introduce you because most of the time I just go right into a conversation with my guests. But you've got an interesting story, and I'm very interested in hearing that story. You're a speech pathologist, and you are a mother to a special needs child. And you've also written a book called Play Dumb and Sabotage. Now, before we get into all of that, I would just like to, because I'm a very curious person, and as I was mentioning before we started, my sons see speech pathologists, but I have no idea what a speech pathologist does. Can you tell my listeners and I what does a speech pathologist do, Janine?
Oh, for you not to know what a speech pathologist does, they are not doing their job right. So, as a speech pathologist, I work with children. I work with adults as well, and we really look at how a person is able to communicate, right? So it goes from the nuances of different sounds, how they're able to articulate different sounds, how they're able to understand communication, and how they're able to express communication. So we study all of these aspects of communication and are able to determine what areas of need a person might have in those areas and how to work with them at becoming better.
Awesome. My understanding of a speech pathologist was just language and saying words correctly. And that's pretty much all I knew. Because growing up, they called it, in school growing up, they called it speech or speech therapy. And the people who do the speech therapy are called speech pathologists. And so I thought it had more to do with speech and enunciation and things like that. But no, it's actually quite a bit more nuanced. It has more to do with the communication side of things, even nonverbal.
Absolutely. So you can, even go further and, children on the spectrum, autism spectrum disorder and things like that, will also take a look at pragmatics, what they're able to decipher from social communication, how they're able to do problem solving and judgment and make inferences and predictions. So there's all these nuances within language that we touch upon as well. But when you explain speech therapy to somebody, you don't want to go too far into it because it seems overwhelming. But even for like an adult who has had a stroke, we're going to be looking at how they're able to understand language, express language, how they're able to navigate their environment and kind of get them back to where they were at what we say baseline, right? Because when we have a stroke, we're going to lose some of these abilities that we had, and we want to get back to where we were.
That's interesting. So it's not kids that exclusively that speech pathologists work with. It's kids, adults, people that have suffered brain injuries, people who have suffered um, strokes and things like that. So that's very interesting, which leads me into your interesting story. As I was reading your information, it kind of struck me. I was like, wow, that's I couldn't imagine if that had I would forever blame myself. But before I take your thunder here, I just want to, could you maybe explain to my guests and or my guests, my listeners, uh, what your story is and how it led you to write your book, Play Dumb and Sabotage?
Absolutely. So I've been a speech therapist for 23 years now, and I did not have my son until 2012. And before I was a mother, I was, a speech therapist working in the school districts, and I loved working with children with special needs. Absolutely loved it. But I thought to myself, I'm glad I don't have a child with special needs because it seemed very difficult. It seemed very overwhelming. And it was something that, a parent can never escape, right? You can't just be like, oh, I'm not going to be a parent of a special needs child anymore. It's like an ongoing thing that you have to face and deal with. And then the universe, gives you all these different cards in life. And my son was 13 months old and he was very active, and I just given him a bath and I put him in the middle of our queen size bed, and But he was so fast at the time, he was learning how to walk and toddle, that he was very curious. And, I turned around to grab some lotion, and he was so fast that he just went off that bed. He fell off the bed, and it was a very short fall, it was 18 inches off the ground, because it was only the box spring and the mattress. But it wasn't a soft surface, it was a wood laminate. And so he fell just the perfect way to give himself a large brain bleed. And at the time, we didn't know what had happened because there was no cut, there was no abrasion on his head. We took him to the emergency room, and he had passed out. And so they rushed him in to do a CT scan. They saw the large brain bleed. They immediately intubated him, rushed him to an emergency craniotomy. And he would have died if they hadn't done that surgery right away. And, you know, initially people were saying he couldn't have gotten hurt that badly from such a short fall. And our story wasn't changing because that was what happened. But because it didn't add up to them in their mind that this child could have gotten a big brain bleed from such a short 18-inch fall, they thought that we tried to hurt him. They tried that they thought I tried to kill him. And so, then we had the whole custody thing happening in front of our faces. And a few days later in the hospital, they had taken him out of the NICU, or the PICU at the time. And I feel like it was too early, and he had a stroke. So a few days later, after his incident, he had a stroke, which left him with right hemiparesis. He doesn't use his right arm or hand, and he still has some balance issues with his right leg. But after the brain injury and the stroke, the doctor said he might never walk or talk. And having this child who was perfect a week before, um, it would change our life. And now I had a child with special needs, and that completely changed my perspective, because as a therapist for children with special needs or people with special needs, it's very different, right? We're very analytical, logical. We kind of problem solve at a distance. But as a parent with a child with special needs, you're able to gain this level of empathy for other people. And I think it really enhanced my ability to be a good therapist. And, working in early intervention, I was able to get my son all his therapies right away, because I knew once we leave the hospital, we're going to need speech therapy, occupational therapy, infant stimulation, physical therapy, anything we could get our hands on. And, me being a speech therapist, I think that was one of the most crucial things for him, because he was getting speech therapy, whether he realized it or not, whether he wanted it or not, he was going to have to work with me. I was working with him, and, he's going to be 12 next month, and he's an amazing kid. And he still doesn't use his right arm or hand, but he can play basketball and shoot with his left hand. He was taking Taekwondo for a number of years. So it really helped with his coordination and balance. He still gets special education services, but he's in a mainstream school with support now, with a one-on-one. And socially, he still doesn't get all the nuances of communication, but he is able to make jokes, which sometimes he only thinks is funny. No one else really gets them sometimes. But he's such a great kid. And um, I wanted to be able to work part-time and continue to pick him up after school, and do as many activities with him as possible. But I want to also gain my um, further my career, right? Because I want to create a greater impact in the world and further my career. But I wanted to have that time freedom as much as possible. So I can't duplicate myself, but I can duplicate the knowledge that I know and the strategies that I can teach. So I wanted to write a book so I could create a greater outreach and also help other people, like yourself, that has a child with special needs, or even parents who don't have children with special needs, but just don't know how to introduce language, how to practice language. And As an early intervention speech therapist, I see so many kids that need speech therapy that are physically sound, cognitively sound. They're just late talkers. And it's not because they are unable to make sounds, they just weren't able to practice and be introduced on how to communicate. And that goes back into parents and how we parents and how we want to caregive and how we want to be great parents by anticipating all of our child's needs, whether it be, are they hungry? Are they wet? Are they cold? Are they hot? What toy do they want to play with? So we do all these things for them, and we're not realizing that we're actually doing them a disservice by doing too much. We become these helicopter parents that are doing too much, showing too much, and not letting that child communicate and interact with their environment naturally. So play dumb is, over anticipating. We over anticipate, but we need to realize that we're over anticipating and then mindfully under anticipate so the child can learn how to communicate. And then the whole sabotage part of it isn't destructive. My mom hated that part of. She's like, "Don't call it sabotage. It sounds destructive." And I was like, "No, no, no. It's part of the learning process because it's part of repetition, So it's like if you're playing basketball, you're going to shoot free throws. You're going to practice your free throws over and over. You can't just do a free throw every now and then, right? So like during snack time, I always tell parents, give them one or two pieces of snack rather than the whole thing. They don't need 100 pieces of goldfish. Give them a couple and then have the bowl in sight but out of reach where the child can indicate that they want more, whether it's looking or reaching or signing for more or saying more. So they can do that, or they can have like their a toy in sight but out of reach that the child would love to have, so they can indicate and practice. Cause and effect toys are great because you can always reset it, right? So you can, if they have like the wind up toy, you wind it up and then it goes, and then for them to have it do for the child to have you do the wind up again, they need to indicate that they want that to happen. So there's simple things that you can implement, and these are all strategies I've used with my son and I use with the children I work with, and I think they're great strategies for any parent who doesn't know what they don't know and can learn a little bit and help their children.
That's interesting because as you're speaking, I'm thinking of times where I actually do that in practice. I don't necessarily call it by that name, but a story I've told a few times on the podcast here, and I apologize to those listeners who have heard it, but um, my son, my youngest son, who's 5, he has autism, and when he was a little guy, I used to smoke cigarettes out here in the garage, and he would come out every now and then, and he would have I'd have a shovel out or something, and he'd go to play with it, and I'm like, no, that's dangerous, and I'll put it back in in the corner. And my wife came out one day, and he was trying to make his way back into the corner, and it was, kind of dangerous back there, I'll admit. But my wife went to go get him out of there, and I was like, no, no, leave him be. And she says, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, if he can get it out of there, he can play with it. And she's like, well, what? And she was kind of confused there for a second. And then I explained my thought process behind it. And I'm like, he's never going to learn how to do anything if he doesn't do it. And, I put it back there, and I made it an obstacle to get it out, and if he can get it out, he can play with it. And that's his reward for doing that, and sometimes we do have to let our kids do dangerous things, just to prove to them that they can do it.
Yeah, yeah. I think that as a mom of a special needs child, I think I'm a little bit more like, oh no, no, be safe, be safe, be safe. But and then his dad's like, let him do it. He can do it. I'm like, okay, gosh. So you have to really, I myself have to remind myself to back off and let the experience happen. And, you know, and it's a learning process as a
Yeah,
parent.
absolutely. Especially with a special needs child, because you don't like, like my little guy has no fear. Like it's just not built into him. Like he has no fear of jumping off the counter, so he's going to have to learn that that's going to hurt. And so I let him know, hey, you're going to hurt yourself. That's going to hurt. But ultimately, like if he does it successfully, he looks at me like, see, I told you. And if it doesn't work successfully, I can look at him and be like, well, you got what you got. And it helps them learn. And that's just my experience of it. And that's why I call myself an unconventional parent, is because I do things like that. And like my 5-year-old uses our house as like a jungle gym. I don't, I have big tall speakers, and he climbs up on those speakers, and he can get hurt, but because he knows what he's doing, because he's used to it, because he does it all the time, the likeliness of him getting hurt goes down each time he does it. And so when I have family members over at the house and they go, and I'm like, no, just leave him be. He's fine. He's cooler than you are. So,
Oh yeah. And children with ASD, some of them are so physically gifted. I had this one kid who would climb to the top of a play structure and then he would look the other way and then jump off. And we're like, what? But he would always land. He'd land on his feet. He'd be like a cat. I was like, oh wow. It was just
yes.
amazing.
Yeah, my little guy, like you were mentioning earlier about when sometimes when we teach, when as you're teaching and you're seeing other children, you see so many people that need speech therapy. As you're saying that, I'm thinking, because my 5-year-old, he doesn't present his diagnosis outwardly. You have to spend a little bit of time with him to understand that he's autistic, and he's level 2 autistic. So it's not like he's really bad, uh,
Mhm.
but it's not like he's got it really easy either. He does need intervention. He's in a regular classroom setting 80% of the time right now, which is pretty good. And but he doesn't present his diagnosis outwardly. And to know that he needs communication, you got to spend a little bit of time with him. And I've had a little bit of difficulty in the public school system, like getting them to understand, listen, just because you don't see it doesn't mean he doesn't need attention. So, be mindful of those things. And you have to understand that he's not going to ask for help every time he needs help. You have to kind of build a relationship with him, and you have to look, see, he needs help. You have to understand when he needs help and when he doesn't need help, because he won't ask for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, autism spectrum disorder is a spectrum, right? There's
Yeah.
so many kids that are maybe nonverbal that need complete help. They're very dependent. And then there's on the other opposite side of the spectrum, there's these kids who there's little nuances of the characteristics in there, but you might not even notice them, right? But they might have problems with like pragmatics or social situations or making inferences and little things that people might not know about. And I had this one child who, at the preschool, he was he didn't get diagnosed until fairly recently, and he's going into kindergarten. And he had made such gains, from within like a year socially. Like he would come to the preschool and hide under a table for like 10 minutes and his parents were like, I don't know how to get him into the school. But slowly by slowly we worked with him like, hey, Miss Pamela is waiting for you. Let's get going. And then slowly by slowly he's like, oh yeah, okay, well, people are waiting for me. I need to start my day. So he made such great progress. And so he was, it was a private preschool. And so when he was transitioning to the public school district, the therapists were saying, well, he's not really showing signs of anything. And we're like, no, 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 he still needs it. So the parents are now going through the process of getting reevaluated by the district because the district didn't offer him anything, which is like insane because, if they saw him 6, 9 months earlier, they'd be like, oh, he definitely needs therapy.
Right.
But, so there's the way that you're able to help a child and then they are compensating in a way, and become so functional in so many ways, it almost like you have to back it up and be like, no, this is what he was doing like 6 months ago, and it might still come up. So he still needs to
Right.
be have a little hand holding as he's transitioning into the general ed setting and moving
I
up to
had that
higher levels of
exact
education. Yeah,
I had that
sounds like it.
exact scenario happen to me when occupational therapy. We had started occupational therapy, and they had set goals in his occupational therapy. Now, after 6 months, he had met those goals, and so they had said, "Okay, he's met his goals, and it's time to move on now." And without setting any new meetings or any new assessments or anything like that, or setting new goals. They just dismissed us, like, and I said, I was thinking, I was like, okay, so he's met this set of goals. So what we do next is we set new goals for him to meet. And that's how we prove, that's how we go further with, because it's not like he doesn't need occupational therapy. He just it's not like his diagnosis suddenly went away, and that I was trying to explain that to them, and they were like, oh, well, he's just met his goals. And so we got to go through this whole process all over again. And I'm like, well, let's get it started then. So,
Yeah. Yeah, coming from working in the schools, I know that there are so many children that need these therapies, right? And the therapists are just overwhelmed with the caseloads, and school
yeah,
districts
yeah,
are
that's
overwhelmed by the caseloads, that they find little ways to dismiss or exit children out of therapy because there are other kids that need it more per se,
right,
but
right.
doesn't make it right.
Absolutely.
When I worked in the schools here in Los Angeles, I was just working 3 days a week and working 2 days at the hospital with adults. And one of my students, was very involved. He had autism spectrum disorder, he had seizure disorder, he had all these other things going on. And, I thought as a speech therapist, he needed 3 days a week of speech therapy because I was there 3 days a week. I thought he needed as much therapy as possible. And when I presented that to the mom, she was astonished because no one had said that he needed that much therapy. Like, she was ready for a fight. She was one of those parents who were like, we're going to go to litigation. We're going to go, you know, all these things.
Yeah, you're
And
not used to running into allies. And
yeah,
when you
yeah,
come to meetings, when you come to meetings, you're not used to you're used to coming up against resistance. And
absolutely.
so maybe she's like very taken aback because I finally have somebody here that understands that we need services.
Yeah, and I didn't even have my son at that point, but it was just the therapist who thought, what does a child actually need rather than, oh, let's give him 30 minutes a week like everybody else.
Yeah.
And we're still friends to this day, the mom and I, and now her son is in his early 20s, which is crazy because, I met him when he was 7 or so.
And you live in Los Angeles, so it's a big, huge place. Like I live
It
in a
is.
place, we live in a small city. It's 75,000 people, give or take. So it's pretty small. Uh, and we made relationships like that last year with our youngest. He was going into preschool, and his preschool teacher, she is fantastic. We're friends. I hope we're friends. I hope I can say that. um we reach out to her every now and then when we need help in an IEP meeting, or we need to pick her brain about something that's going on in the school. Or so yeah, it's absolutely wonderful when you run into allies, and especially folks that don't already have their own children or already have their own special needs children. That's actually pretty cool.
Thank you.
So what's it like? So I wanted to really quick. I wanted to go further into play dumb and sabotage um that whole philosophy, because I think I identify greatly with play dumb. What is play dumb part?
Yeah, so the play dumb parts, we're adults. We're pretty smart, hopefully.
Right.
And we know how to anticipate, answers to questions, situations that the child might be in. So playing dumb is anywhere from, you know, under anticipating what the child needs, like I said, giving a little bit of snack, or it goes all the way to asking absurd questions with children who are a little bit older. So I'll be like, "Oh, does a dog say meow?" Or, I'll show them an animal or something and ask them, "Oh, do I eat this?" when it's like, a pencil or something like, whatever it is. So
Right.
asking absurd questions, being silly, because kids love being smarter than you, right? They love
Right.
being like, "Oh my gosh, you're so dumb. Like, why don't you know this answer?" Or like you're
So play
putting,
dumb like with a purpose, like
yeah,
put intention behind your question, leave an open-ended question and make them think a little bit.
yeah. And it
That's
also,
interesting.
it also helps the child gain rapport with you because now you're playing. They think, that you're more of a, ally and communicative partner rather than a teacher. I'm not telling you to do something per se, but a lot of kids will kind of come out of their shell because now we're laughing, we're having fun, and they love when, we're playing. So when I'm playing dumb, I'm trying to get them to say the right answer or to question what I'm telling them, because I might be like, "Oh, is the sun cold?" Like just asking them stupid questions. And they just are like, "Oh, no, it's hot." Like, "Oh, would you wear a swimsuit in December?" Or something like that in the snow, and just being silly about that. So
Yeah, that's
it's,
that's awesome. I love every bit of that because I do that sometimes, but I don't often know what to call it. So and like as you're telling me about play dumb and sabotage before I'm kind of breaking it down. I'm thinking like I do this stuff all the time. I just didn't know like what to call it and how to explain to people like, hey, we need to kind of let these kids be independent because we're raising a whole generation of kids that don't know how to do anything. And
yeah,
that's my whole thing. That's exactly a reason why I do the things the way I do is because I want these kids to be able to live without me. I want them to be independent. Eventually, I want them to leave my house. I want to be my own person. I've not been my own person for 21 years, and I've got, 13 more. Eventually, I want to have my own life,
yeah,
and I need these kids to be independent so they can think when they're my age, hey, eventually I want to have my own life, and then they teach their kids independently and we can get back to the way things used to be. And kind of like people in Europe right now, like they raise their kids very independent from an early age. You have 5 and 6 year olds walking to school on their own.
yeah.
That's the way we used to be when we were kids. So it's like, where did that go? Where did we become helicopter parents all the time? Where did that go wrong? And I think part of it is just worrying too much about so many things that are out of our control. And if something bad is going to happen, it's probably just going to happen. And kind of like, and not to bring up, a sore subject or anything, but there's with your son, you pretty much did everything that you could do to prevent that from happening. The bed was on the floor, and he was in the middle of the bed. And, sometimes things just happen. And no matter how much we try to prevent those things, they're just going to happen. So why shelter the children and actually hinder them when you do that? Because when they grow up, you're going to push them out of the house eventually, and they're not going to know how to do anything. They're not going to can be able to communicate with people. They're not going to be able to call and make their own doctor's appointments. And so as you're talking to me about play dumb and sabotage, I'm like, everybody needs to read this book. So,
I would
and
love everybody to read the book. I think it'd be very helpful. Some other play dumb things would be like, when I would dress my son, I might put like his shorts on my head or something and be like, "Oh, is that where it goes?" You know? Or even now, I'm like, he's 11 and he'll grunt or he'll be like, "Juice," whatever. I'm just like, dude, speak in a full sentence. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like,
I
what?
do that with my son all the time too. And I used to just get up and do the things. And then I'm like, well, he's never going to learn how to do if I don't make him do. So, and
Yeah.
like, especially like he'll go over and stand at the refrigerator, and he's 5 and fully verbal. Like, there's no reason why he can't talk. And he point or and I'm like, well, use your words. What do you want? And he'll still play the game. So I'll walk away. I'll just start doing
Oh,
whatever I was
yeah.
doing before. And I'm like, well, if you can't ask, if you can't use your words, you don't need it that bad.
Yeah. If he points to the refrigerator, be like, yep, that's a refrigerator. It keeps food cold. That's what it's for. And then just, yeah, and just play dumb. Be like, yep. Mm-hmm.
So breaking down the sabotage part of it a little bit, can you go a little bit deeper into that part?
Yeah, like I said, sabotage is all about like the repetition, right? And the practice. So the sabotage is creating opportunities for them to practice language over and over again. So giving a little bit of snack, having something in sight but out of reach, having putting a toy that they love maybe in a container they can't open. They're just like, they might show it to you, be like, oh, yeah, that's the ball in there, and then oh, you need to open, and like whether it's a sign or verbally, and then creating other things like putting something in the wrong place. So if I put like my son's shoe or something, if I put it on the couch or whatever, where it shouldn't be, putting some things where it shouldn't be, creating situations where they can identify like, oh, that should not be there. This is where it should be. I might, put something, like I have a sticker or something, I might put it on his head rather than someplace else on his body, like his arm or his hand or on the paper, and be like, then he'll be like, "What are you doing?" I'm trying to create and stimulate language and communication. So sabotage is kind of messing with them in a way,
Yeah,
you know?
that's awesome. I like the example that you gave, like putting something in a container that they can't open, and like here, you figure it out. I love that.
Yeah, if you can't figure it out, then you have to use your words to ask me to do it.
That's right.
So because if it's in a container they can open, they're just going to open the container and have the item. But if you sabotage it where they can't open it, then they have to use their words.
That's awesome. So you'd mentioned you lived in Los Angeles. So how long have you been in Los Angeles?
So I moved here in 2005 from Honolulu, Hawaii. So people always say, "Why did you move from Hawaii?" And it was actually to do acting. So I do acting sometimes. I don't, I'm not a huge, like my resume isn't gigantic or anything like that. But if an acting job comes up, I'll definitely take it.
That's
But I
awesome.
was I was very glad I was a speech therapist already because you know, when I moved from Hawaii to Los Angeles, I'm like, I'm just going to be a waitress because I waitressed for many, many years through grad school and even working part-time when I was working in the school districts in Hawaii. And I was like, I'm just going to be a waitress and do acting. And after, almost a year of doing that, I was like, I'm working 60 or 70 hours a week waitressing, trying to pay my bills, and I could just, work half of that doing speech therapy. So I'm able to work part-time, be a mom now and do acting when that pops up, or, be a guest on podcasts like today.
That's awesome. Yeah, I've never been to Los Angeles, but I definitely want to make it there because Universal Studios is one of my favorite places to go in Orlando, and they have one in Los Angeles. So I'm like, and it's totally different. So the one in Orlando is like more theme park-ish, and the one in Hollywood is more Hollywood themed. And I'm totally into the Hollywood theme. So I want to actually I want to go out there for that. And then of course Disneyland is in Los Angeles. But
Yeah.
I've just never been to I've been all around Los Angeles, but never
Yeah.
been to Los Angeles.
Oh,
So
wow.
that's one of the places I've got to go. We live near Kansas City, so that's the closest big city. But I have a feeling the Los Angeles would put Kansas City to shame. I drove into
Ah,
Chicago one time. It took us 30 minutes to get from the outside of Chicago to downtown. And there was no traffic or anything. It was just that long of a distance.
oh, wow.
30 minutes. And like we could see giant size skyscrapers and we were coming into Chicago. Took us 30 minutes to get to downtown. I was like, this place is huge. And
Yeah.
it really like a city block of Chicago put Kansas City to shame. And I was like, wow. So I that's one of the things I like to do. We love to travel and go to different places, but I've been out west, but my family hasn't.
Oh,
So
yeah.
it's
Los Angeles is gigantic. I remember flying into Los Angeles from Hawaii for the first time as an adult, like when I came when I was like in third or fourth grade. But as an adult, I flew in and I just saw lights, residential lights for miles and miles and miles. It never ended. I was like, how big is this place? So Greater Los Angeles is gigantic.
yeah.
And for here, you go 3 miles and it's 20 minutes because of the traffic. So,
Yeah, yeah. So Chicago was kind of similar to that, like in the middle of the day on a like Monday through Friday or whatever, but on the weekend it was pretty good. But you had mentioned the lights of Los Angeles. That's another thing. That's something that you didn't have in Hawaii is a whole bunch of lights, a whole bunch of light pollution. And so one of the places that's on my bucket list is Hawaii. So I want to visit the Keck Observatory. It's an observatory that sits above the clouds in Hawaii, and there's at like 7 p.m. they turn down the lights, and all the lights have diffusers on them on the islands so that the light pollution doesn't interfere with the observatory. And I thought that was one of the coolest things. But the view above the observatory is what I really want to go for. I want to go sky
yeah.
watch. I'm
Oh,
kind of a
nice.
UFO fan, so
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Which island is that one on? Is it on Maui, Oahu, or Big
I'm wanting
Island?
to say it's on Oahu. I'm not
Oh, okay.
100% on that.
Yeah, if you go to Maui, there's Haleakala, and that is like above the clouds. It's like it's like, it's one of the highest points in the world. And
Yeah.
you can go up
Yeah.
there and drive. I get a little motion sickness from driving that long, the windy roads, but that's one of the highest points. If you really love to take a look and a good view, it's great because you can go up there before the sun rises and it'll snow up there in the winter. It's kind of amazing.
Wow. Yeah. So the Keck Observatory, and I don't want to butcher this, so I'll spell it Waimea, Hawaii. Waimea.
Waimea. Okay. That
Yeah.
sounds,
Waimea.
yeah.
So I don't know if I had to zoom out on that and find out which island that's on.
Let's see. I should probably know this by heart.
Yeah. It says Wailea island, maybe. No, it's a
Oh
city.
yeah, it's on the Big Island.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
it's
Big
on the Big
Island. There we
Island.
go. Yeah.
Hmm.
So that's what
Which
they
is
call it, the
Hawaii,
Big Island.
the Big Island of Hawaii. So the
Okay.
island is named Hawaii, but the nickname is the Big Island. Yeah.
So I'm not geography is not my strong suit. I knew where it was. So
Oh no, geography is not mine. I say I'm from Hawaii. I know where nothing is.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, so that we love to travel though, and I love to talk to people from different places that I've never been to Los Angeles, and I think that's really a neat place that I'd love to go to. And I'm scared of the traffic, but it's okay. I won't drive. I'll use public transport
Yeah, yeah.
or Ubers. Ubers are a big thing around there, right?
The Ubers are, and now they have Waymos. Have you heard of a Waymo?
Oh yeah, those are those self-driving cars, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
self-driving like they're Jaguars.
That would be
They're
so
Jaguar
cool.
cars. Yeah,
That would be so cool.
I've seen so many more of them in the last month, just like driving around. Kids are getting dropped off at school in Waymos. It's crazy.
Really? That's
Yeah,
awesome. That's awesome. I don't think it would work around here because there's not enough people. I
yeah,
don't think to serve. And not only that, but after the sun goes down, they probably tip over the cars or something. Like crimes,
Uh,
crime's not a big thing around here. It's not like violent crime, but a lot of
yeah.
property crime happens. A
Oh,
lot of
wow.
property crime happens here. I
Oh,
think it's really not. I think it's really the economy. And you know how they have those smash and grabs in San Francisco all the time. It's not
yeah.
like that here. It's more like crimes of opportunity. Like if nobody's around, they might vandalize something or, it's stuff like that. A lot of kids running around and stuff. But
Yeah.
we only have 75 police officers for 40 square miles here. And
Oh, wow.
so, yeah, at night, sometimes, when there's not a bunch of them in a big area, a big spot, there's bound to have stuff happen. We had a bunch of those little scooters and stuff that you use a card and you can rent the little scooter.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
We had a bunch of those and people didn't mess with those. They just didn't know, nobody used them, so they stopped, they took them away. So I'm afraid like if we had something like Waymo, it'd be something like that where we don't use them enough to justify having them. So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
so
LA has lots of scooters everywhere and people just hop on, it's crazy.
I thought
Yeah.
that was the neatest thing. When the first time I actually saw somebody using them, I was like, hey, justification right there. I thought it was the coolest thing. And then, like 2 weeks later, there was an article in the newspaper that said, hey, people don't use them as much as we thought they would. And, we have to pay this person to come and maintenance them and service them and charge them. And it turns out we're actually losing money. So we're going to close the program down. And I
Oh,
thought, oh, something that was really cool here, doesn't, gets underutilized. So we lose it, but
yeah.
it
Some
is what
people
it
buy
is.
their own. Some people will
Yeah.
buy their own little scooter. But here in Los Angeles, it's like the traffic is just crazy. I'm just like, someone's gonna get hit. It's
Yes. Yes. Yeah. That's one thing that I do fear going out to Los Angeles for is because I'm a very impatient person. And it's not like I'm impatient that I can't wait, 10 minutes to go this far, but sitting in traffic for 4 hours to go 3 blocks, I couldn't do it.
yeah, it'll be like 20, 30 minutes
Yeah.
when you go
I can
during
I
rush
can
hour.
handle 20 to 30 minutes during rush.
Yeah.
I can handle that. That
Yeah.
probably wouldn't be so bad. But
Yeah.
yeah, Chicago was I when I was driving around Chicago, I couldn't do anything but laugh because I was trying to pick up my wife from her class and it was like 3 blocks away from the hotel, but we were going to go get lunch when I picked her up. And I just had to drive around in circles because I couldn't get to her. The traffic was so thick. I started
Oh.
out in the center lane and I couldn't get over to turn, and so I just went around in circles for about 20 minutes until I was able to get over. And I called her and I was like, "Hey, you see me circling around. Can you try to walk to me?" And so before I was able to get to her, she was able to get to me. So it was
Oh,
fun.
yeah. It's probably you're too polite. I think people in like the big cities, I'm probably a little too polite as well, but they just go. They just start
Yeah.
switching lanes and you're either going to hit them or let them, like so they just go. And I'm just like, wow, we have so many crazy drivers here.
Yeah, that's what I was telling my wife. I was like, I just can't do anything but laugh. I said because I'll nose my way over there, and I know how to do that. It's like I have a CDL, so I drive big trucks,
Yeah.
and some driving a big truck in Kansas City is a disaster. But it's one of those things I just happen to be good at.
Yeah.
But I told her I was like, yeah, I can nose my way over there. It's not that big a deal to do that. It's just I don't want to get hit while I'm on vacation. So it's like I told her I was like, man, I can't do anything but laugh because it's so absurd. But it's a good thing we didn't have anywhere to go because it was so funny and it was one of those things. If you don't laugh, you might cry. So,
Oh, yeah,
but
absolutely.
yeah. So when with your when you're So you're a speech pathologist for X amount of years, and then you have your son. And how much did being a speech pathologist help you, do you think, in dealing with that transition of, okay, everything was fine, but now we need services? Do you think being a speech pathologist helped you along your journey?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because if I wasn't a speech therapist, um, I wouldn't know what strategies to use, and what therapies he might need and how to, reach out to different uh, places, therapies or what to ask for. Um, and that kind of brought me back to, parent training. Like parents aren't trained to do things in this realm. They're not trained to teach language. They're not trained to, you know, teach fine motor skills or, other therapies. So it's like, as a parent, as a therapist, as a parent, it was much easier for me um to step back and think logically about it. And if you're a parent who doesn't have the knowledge, then you're just in emotion. You're just in this emotion and kind of panic state
And
where,
taking things personally.
yes, absolutely, absolutely. And like, like you said that you would feel this guilt forever. It's like, even though I know it was an accident, I will have this guilt forever, whether I go to therapy or not, because
Yeah.
it happened on my watch. And my son wouldn't be who he is now, um, as a disabled child, probably, hopefully would not have if that hadn't happened. But who knows? You can't change the past and you can only
Move
do
forward.
better, move
Yeah.
forward. And I think he's an amazing person with a great spirit and great personality. And he loves his mom, he loves his dad, but he really, he gives me so many kisses every day. Just like, I know one day that will stop, but he gives me so many kisses every day. He's like, I love you. I can't, he's like, I love you. I just love you too much, mom.
Does that ever
You
hurt
know,
your feelings when you think about it? One day that will stop.
um, not so much
It does
hurt my
me.
feelings. It kind of makes me a little bit uh yeah, a little bit not sad, but it's a little bit sad, but
Bittersweet,
yeah.
because you want them to grow and you want them to mature, but at the same time, you want to be selfish and be like, no, you're mine forever.
I tell them, I said, you will be my baby forever, no matter how big
Oh
you are,
my
because
goodness, we've hit this stage now where so we call our 5-year-old baby. Like we'll ask you, do you want some water, baby? Or how you doing, baby? Or I love you, baby. And he says, I'm not a baby. I'm a big boy. And it's so funny. It's so cute.
yeah, you have to create some other kind of nickname for him that means baby
Yes.
to you in your
Yes.
mind.
And he's got this little tablet. And so it's a big tablet, but he calls it a TV because to him it is a TV. He doesn't know what a tablet is. And so we call it a tablet. He's like, it's not a tablet, it's a TV. And I'm like, thinking logically, yeah, it's a screen. So yeah, we could call it a TV. But it's so funny. He'll correct us every time. It's not a tablet, it's a TV.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so going back and, I'm glad that I'm a speech therapist, that I could reach out to other therapists that I know and ask them, consultation questions. Because if you're just a regular parent who doesn't know anybody, it's like, who are you going to reach out to?
Yeah,
So I have this special knowledge, I feel. So I really want to share knowledge with everybody else because I think that's super important because we don't know what we don't know. And, if we can just give a little bit of knowledge to parents, they can have a head start on what they need to be doing. And rather than
absolutely.
swim in this space of not knowing and in this space of guilt, because I have a lot of parents who, their kid is 2 years old, they're not talking, you know, And then they think, oh, it's okay. I'm a good parent, so my child's going to be okay.
Yeah.
When we're like, oh no, they need speech therapy. And it's not a criticism on your parenting skills. You just don't know what you don't know.
Exactly. That's a very good way to put it. You don't know what you don't know. And a lot of us parents, like we get defensive sometimes, and you had mentioned something about parent training. Oh, and that it kind of sparked something. And we actually have a parent caregiver trainer for it's not ABA therapy, but it's not ABA therapy, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's ABA therapy inspired. But just teaching, he comes to the house once a week and he comes and teaches us things that we need to know to help teach our son the things that he needs to know and also help us identify problem areas where we may need to step in and how to do those things when we get there. And I can't think I can't begin to describe how much he has helped. And it's not like he just comes and talks to us. It's not like he's actually like training us, but he
Hmm.
gives us resources. He gives us, reading material to help us, even if we're not having these problems right now, we may come across these problems in the future, and this is how you can handle it. Or these are some ways that can teach you how to work around those things. And these are all common sense things so far that I've learned, but it's
Hmm.
just practical applications of knowledge already learned. And it's immeasurable how much that it's helped. And not just me, but my wife and also our youngest son. It's an immeasurable help. I can't even describe it. And parent training is very important because, like you said, we don't know what we don't know. And I appreciate you wanting to share your knowledge with the world and share your story. And it's coming up against adversity like that and cognitive being self-aware enough to know, okay, this has happened, but now we need to move forward and proceed with caution, but execute. And I admire that very much, and I appreciate your story. And I just, hey, anybody that doesn't hasn't read this book, you need to go out and buy this book, Play Dumb and Sabotage. I'm going to go out and buy it myself, and I'm going to read it because I bet there's a lot of practical applications in there I already use. But Jeaneen, I appreciate you coming by and having this conversation with me. And if there is there anything else that you think any other information that we might find helpful or
Yeah, some things just to highlight, like some of the things that I like to tell parents is don't ask a yes, no question unless you're ready to honor that no. And that goes for educators as well, because we often ask kids, are you ready to work? Are you ready to clean up? Are you ready to go to bed? Can you say this or can you do this? We're asking all these yes, no questions when we really don't want to have them say no, right? Because if they say no, we're still going to try and make them do it. Does
yes,
that make sense? So
it
we
does.
can't we can't ask a yes no question unless you're really going to honor that no. So if you say, "Are you ready to work?" and they say no, then you can't just say, "Well, we're still going to do it." you know so some ways to get around that would be offering choices. So if I tell my son, okay, we're going to get ready for bed, do you want to brush your teeth first or change into pajamas first? Or we're going to have a snack, do you want some apples or oranges? Or we're going to do reading and math right now, which one do you want to do first, reading or math? Which, like, give them a choice so they can feel like they are part of that, making the decisions. They have
Yeah,
some
because we're
power in that.
going to do this, but which
We're
do you
gonna,
want to do
yeah,
first?
yes. Or which one do you want to do last, to kind of change it up, Um, and then also if I'm working with a kid for articulation or expanding their length of utterance, which is like making their sentences longer, I might say elephant, you say it, your turn, rather than like, can you say elephant? Can you say the elephant has a long trunk? I'd be like, the elephant has a long trunk. What else? Like, or you say it, whatever it is. So I think you'll have a lot more cooperation with kids if you change your mindset. And it's a lot of work in your own mind to not ask a yes no question because you know I still have parents that I work with that I'm like, oh, you just asked a yes, no question. Do you really want to ask that? So I have to constantly remind them, and they're often catching themselves like, oh, yeah, I need to not ask a yes, no question. And then we can be better about that. And then I think parents should, don't discount having fun and playing and utilizing music with your
Oh, yes.
language,
Yes,
utilizing music
music
with
is
language
wonderful. I
because
I love that.
yeah, because like nursery rhymes are so memorable, right? And
Yeah.
songs are so memorable. And when you pair the music with the words become memorable because you're bridging the side of the language, which is the left side of the brain, with the musical side, which is the right side of the brain. And when those two things go together, they're solidified. They just make more sense. There's a rhythm to what is being said. And
Yeah.
I'll take any rhythm or rhyme or whatever, and I'll make up a sentence that goes with that, or a song that goes with whatever we're doing. I might say, um, you know, the cat has black eyes. The cat has black eyes. What else does he have? Like just being silly. It could be any, you can make it up on the fly. It doesn't have to make truly any sense. It doesn't have to be a real song. But if
And
you
you can
start,
actually get children, you can actually start to associate reading or letters or numbers with a certain emotional response if you put it into a song. Like if
yeah.
you put it into a song and it's got an upbeat tempo,
Hmm.
you can elicit a happy response from your child when you put on a music or put on an up tempo song and you learn music to that or learn a certain book to the up tempo beat to that
Hmm.
song, it'll elicit a happiness response when they hear that book or when they see that book. They'll be like, I want to read that book. It makes me feel good.
Yeah. Yeah, like Brown Bear, that book,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
It's like no one reads it, Brown Bear, what do you see? And everybody's like, Brown Bear, what do you see? I see a red bird looking at me. So it's all musical, it's melodical, it's happy, they're able to actually anticipate what comes next, after they've been reading the book for a while with someone. And um, I think it's just really important to have a rhythm to your speech as well when you're teaching it. Because there is like you can tap out syllables, you can clap out syllables to words in a sentence, and it just becomes, using this multimodal communication system, right? Because we can hear things, we can see things, we can feel it. So we can also feel that rhythm of the word and just kind of solidifying communication by using all your different senses. So.
Absolutely. I love every bit of that. That's so awesome. I, so as where I'm preparing for this conversation today, I knew it was going to be a good one, but man, I've had a lot of fun today. It's so awesome to talk to people. And I live, in the Midwest, corner of Missouri, and I don't get out much. So when I meet people who are like-minded from all the way in Los Angeles, it's a very neat feeling. And I appreciate you coming by. And I think that's a great place to leave this conversation. And if you don't mind, maybe coming up on 2025 next year when we go into summer, you don't mind if I reach back out to you and discuss different things that we can do in the summertime to keep our kids engaged.
Absolutely. I would love that. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeaneen. It's been a great time, and we'll catch you next time. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. Have a great day.